We're just going to hear a little story of their story, Jen and Serge's. And if you don't know them, this is Jen and Serge Kamari. And before we begin, Jen or Serge, would you take a moment and introduce us to your family?
Sure. That's a picture of our family. Isabella is 18. She's looking to go to university in the fall. The tall guy is Benny. He's our youngest, and he's 15 and loves basketball. And he's here at EDSS. And then Prince on the other side, he is 27 and back in Rwanda doing business.
Okay, great. And again, thanks for being here and sharing some of your story. 10 years ago, myself as well as Willard Bauman and Paul Fletcher were able to go over to Rwanda, and we stayed at the Kamari's house. And I mentioned the first service, Benny was like 5 years old at the time, loved basketball. They had a driveway there, and so I would show him a few of my tricks. Or one trick. And today I'm like, Benny, if I see Benny on a court, please have mercy on me, like that guy. So things change, people grow up. Jen, you were in Sunday school here as a little girl. We'd like to hear a little bit about how God brought you to Rwanda. If we could have the next picture. This is Jen, and we'll get back to this picture, but Jen has served in Rwanda for over 20 years. And how did you get from Woodside to, and let's just take it to the phone call.
Sure. Okay. Sure. So Dan, I think most of you know, I grew up here at Woodside, and, youth group, young adults, through high school, very involved in the youth group here. After high school, I got a job, but still involved, in ministry here in all kinds of different ways. And one night I got a phone call from Neil Ostrander, who was working at International Teams, and he said, hi, Jen. And I was like, oh, hi, Neil. And I thought he was calling to get Woodside to take a short-term mission team through International Teams. And he's like, no, that's not why I'm calling. He's like, I'm calling about you. And he said, 3 people came back with your name this morning in our office to be the next director of short-term mission for International Teams. And so he said, here I am, I'm calling you. So that took me to, I was in a great job, and now I was being called out by God in ministry. Yeah.
Okay. So you're serving in your area of gifting, leadership, vision, teaching here at Woodside. You get this phone call out of the blue. Then what did you do? Did you have to pray about it, work through any fears, giving up a job, like what?
Well, all of that. So made some phone calls, had some dinners. I mentioned the first service, I called Bob and Kathy Allison. I said, so I need to talk to somebody. And they said, come on over. And so just said, this has come up in my life. And they were super affirming, the leadership here at Woodside. It was interesting with my family because it's like you're leaving a great job and you're going to go be a full-time missionary. And I had grown up listening to all the missionary stories, letters were being read, weekly. And I'm not one of those that knew that I was going to be a missionary the rest of my life. Like, that was not on my radar. I knew I was called to whatever God had for me, but not to be a missionary. And anyways, in my heart, it was just like, but God, if you've called me to this, if I need to leave my financial stability, career, you're going to show up. You have to show up. And that was 30 years ago, over 30 years ago, and here I am.
And just like Nehemiah, those prayers, Lord, you got to show up. Okay, you were with International Teams as their director of short-term missions for almost 10 years. During those 10 years, you did take a trip over to Rwanda. And could you share what you saw there, how God was working in your heart at the time?
Yeah. So it was, I went on a short-term trip to as a setup trip to take another team there, and I had a fleeting thought. Couple, actually. One was that a few months before, God really impressed on me that he had something for me in Rwanda. And I had traveled many, many places in the world over those 9.5 years. I'd seen many corners of the world that lots of people have not seen, with the oppressed and the poor. But I had the impression one other time in Romania, but when I was in Rwanda, I saw these women with baskets on their head, and they had, fruit or avocados or whatever they could find to sell, to feed their family for the day. And I just thought, if God would ever bring me here, I would start a cafe. I would start a coffee shop, because there were no coffee shop. I would start a coffee shop, and I would make dessert, because I know how to bake. So we could do that, and we could sell it, but they could work for me, and they would learn business. But I would also make sure that they're literate, and that, that they knew about nutrition, and that they knew, what God's purpose was for their life. And so that was just this fleeting thought that I had. Probably took less than a minute, But anyways, that was the best
Gives you
thing.
this burden for these women. Okay.
But I came back to Canada and, carried on with life.
Then you get another phone call or another opportunity to meet with international teams with the board, and God had been working there. They were sensing that maybe there could be a work over in Rwanda, and so they ask you to leave your position as short-term missions director to go over to Rwanda in ministry there. Did you have any fears?
Well, yeah. I grew up on a dairy farm north of Floridale. I was a single woman. And now, God, you're calling me to move 11,000 kilometers away to the heart of a continent that I had visited once, to a country that's coming out of genocide, and so very different than so many places in the world. Developing country, and they continue to develop today, but a very developing country in 2003, 2004. And so there was lots of fears. Another big one too was just feeling inadequate. Like just going like, I'm a single white female, like how can I carry the gospel? How can I carry the good news of Jesus Christ into a country and into a culture where I'm so different and so privileged, and so, how would I be able to communicate in a way that they would embrace it, and that they would recognize that God is love, and that God is faithful, God is true, all the good news of the gospel, that it would be for them. And so that was, I think, my greatest fear, and I really had to wrestle that through, and over the years, even when I was there, wrestling it through and going to, like, Jesus used untrained, unschooled men and women, and I'm one of those. And so those people changed the kingdom, and so I want to be part of that. So that was my piece, and that's where I landed in all these years, really.
And pushing you through that, and as you're talking to the Lord, he also used his people. Could you speak to that?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I mentioned Bob and Kathy. I mean, the leadership here at Woodside, so I don't want to get naming names, but there's so many people. Well, I will mention Dennis and Miriam, who got me because they lived in Africa for so many years as well, who just encouraged and asked good questions and wanted to make sure I was okay, made sure we were okay as a family. And, I've had people my entire life, in my youth group days, my young adult days, directors of other mission organizations calling me out because I was often the only female in a meeting. And they say, no, Jen, we need your voice at the table. You need to be here. And so God placed those people in my life, and I'm forever grateful for them.
Great. Just to our Woodside Church family, if you are older, over 50, you need to be looking out at the young people, noticing them, maybe speaking into their life. I see this about you, or I just want to encourage you, because God used people in your life, and he wants to use us here at Woodside. Great. Okay, so you're in Rwanda. God leads you there, and then you meet that guy. And in a country at the time of about 8.5 million people, how did you two meet? And Serge, could you just share a little of that?
Yeah, so before Jen came to Rwanda, her and her friend Tilly decided to go down to U.S. to visit a group of Rwandan, boys and girls who were going to school there. So they went down, and then one of those students, Barbara, is my cousin. So then Barbara found out that Jen was going to Rwanda. She came with a big package and gave her to take to her siblings. And then Jen came to Rwanda. She arrived in Kigali, and then Barbara's brother called her and invited her for dinner. And then she came for dinner. And if you ask Jen, she will say, I just happened to be there. But I actually was living with Barbara's brother. And so Jen came, and we had a good visit. And then I realized I'm looking at this, we'll say Muzungu, meaning the white girl. And she's laughing too much. She's talking too much. And eating our food. And I'm like, wow, this girl, like, she's just like herself. She's, relaxed. And I just thought there was something different about her and interesting at the same time. So I wanted to get to know her more, and especially that I can tell she's a Christian. And so that was our first connect. And then we became friends. And then 20 months later, we got married, and here we are.
And Jen, when you saw Serge for the first time and he smiled at you, you weren't like, oh, I want to marry that guy. You were serving the Lord single into your 30s, and then it wasn't just like, oh, I want to marry this guy. You had to pray that through God. Is that your purpose plan for my life?
Absolutely, because I grew up on the 6th of Peel, North Floridale, and in a very white community. And so my kids always laugh, like, when I say this, but never in a million years did I think I would live in Africa, and never in a million years did I think I would marry a black guy. And God has other plans. Here we are, right? And so I was in I was 34, 35 at the time, and I really had to wrestle through, and I was very content to be single, but I was very aware that being director of short term, I needed to be single in that role because there was no way I could do as much traveling and stuff as what I did being married. But so the piece that I was wrestling with is like, so if I marry Serge, if Serge and I get married, can we serve better in the kingdom together? Can we do more in the kingdom together because we're married? And so that's where we really landed. I think both of us, right, had to journey through that. Because not just me marrying a black guy, for him to marry a white person as well. It was both and. It's not just one or the other. And so that's where we really had to land and be at peace about that, of just going, no, God's called us to serve together in his kingdom. And whatever swirls around that, that's God's battle, not mine. And he clearly told me that before we got married. That the battle's his, it's not mine. And so that was just, I've gone back to that so many times of just, what am I doing here? What are we doing here? It's like, no, the battle's mine, it's not yours. Okay, I can rest in that.
Wow. So Lord brings you to Rwanda, and never in a million years do you think you'd get married to Serge. You do. Could you just share quickly some of the ministries over the years that you guys have been involved in and started, and then some of them continue to this day? So Serge.
Yeah, one of those ministries is the cafe. Most of the ministry we've been involved in was with the most vulnerable people, but we got to a point where we wanted to move away from just giving handout, but we wanted to build the capacity of the people we were trying to serve and empower them so that they have the ability to solve their own problems. And so in order to do that, I took an entrepreneurship course, very intensive, and it was designed that at the end of this course, you come up with a viable business plan. So I did that, but at the end of it, I had so many business ideas, but I couldn't really come up with one that I thought would work. And then I just went over and talked to Jen. And then as we're talking, and I said to her, I knew she could bake, she's very good at that. Then I said, hey, do you remember the idea you had when you first came to Rwanda about employing these women who are trying to sell off the basket, and how about, doing that? She was like, oh yeah, that would be a good idea. So we started Jerlene's Cafe. We were, doing bagel sandwiches and coffee and so many baking product. So this cafe really became it was an opportunity we had like 21 full-time women. Most of them, some of them were survivors of genocide, single mothers, and many who were really poor, but now they have an opportunity to work and earn money and solve their own problem, and their self-esteem and dignity was built. And so it also became a community, for a place for many people to come and be, many Rwandans, but also foreigners who are living in Rwanda who enjoy the product we're selling. It became a place for them to come and meet other new people. So that's one of the ministries.
Yeah, I remember when I was over there meeting many of these women and hearing their stories and having nothing coming out of genocide and being able to generate an income, and wow, it was very moving there. And just so we're following along, does everyone see how God, in a relationship with Him, He works behind the scenes, orchestrating things to accomplish His purposes? For Jen, some of us that are older, we can look back. For Jen, it's an unexpected phone call. Then it's a basket on a woman's head. Then it's a package. God is working and moving. Second ministry is working with street kids coming out of genocide in Kigali, especially the capital city. Lots of kids in poverty and vulnerable. Could you share?
Yeah, the street kid was one of the big ministry we were involved in. And so, but before we started with this ministry, Jen and I and our good friend Gilles, we went around to talk to the government and other organizations that were involved with the street kid ministry, because it was after the genocide. There were so many children on the street. And as we talked to them, we find out all of these organizations were only looking after the physical needs, and no one was touching the heart. And we realized in order to be successful, we needed to be intentional about adding some spiritual component to this program. So we went along providing, everything that they needed, food, shelter, education, medical support. But at the same time, they love playing soccer. But before we go for a soccer game, we will do a devotion or pick a topic to talk about. We encourage them to come and be part of the church. We have Bible studies, but we were intentional from the beginning that in order to do all this, we needed to build strong relationship with these street kids. We needed them to trust us so that they will be open to share with us their struggles. And so, but this ministry was there were so many problems, and it was really hard. And I remember personally being frustrated and feeling like I don't see the change, because I wanted to see an immediate result, but it wasn't coming. But we keep pushing. And I remember, too, that it was actually an opportunity for me because I was using my gift, and we had so many volunteers and other people helping out. But then until we started seeing small changes, like I see Phineas, who is now helping out doing sound at church. I see Caberso, who is now, it looks clean, and those things started kind of really encouraging me. And one of other story was this kid in Shuti, who I would think back then that he was a failure because he did terrible through this program and he left. And then one day he calls me and he said, "Hey, Dad," that's how they called, Jen and I, Mom and Dad. And then he said, "You know what, I'm in Uganda, I'm now doing business, and I'm doing well. But I want to thank you. I am grateful for all the things that you did for me." And I'm thinking like, wow, I thought you were a failure. I didn't say that to him, but he said, "Well, I want you to know that every time that I'm sitting by myself, I think about everything that you taught me. And I want you to know that I am who I am today because of you." And that really taught me something. And I thought, like, you know what, in the ministry or in life, we need to be obedient. We need to fall through the call that God has put on our heart. And what we do is to water a plant. We plant seeds, and then people help us to water the young plant. But it's ultimately God that brings change and transformation. So the street key ministry has been a big part of our life. And so when I look back now, if I'm in Kigali and I need help to fix my car, who do I call? Democracy. That's a real name of a person. Democracy was a street kid, but today he's a trained mechanic. You know, if I need help with finding a rental house, you know, I'll call Jean-Paul. You know, and these are men and women who are productive members in the society today who were once upon a time street children.
And because of time, I'd like to just reference a couple other ministries you were involved in. There was the refugee camp in Kza, and you, for many years, were involved in that. As well, pastoral training. You guys have spoken to parents and leaders and pastors, and I know Paul Fletcher and a few others have gone over to be part of that pastoral training, so that's wonderful. And before I close with a question to Jen, Serge, would you just talk to us about Kza Life, the ministry that continues today? And I know there's other ministries there, but that one in particular, just share with us.
Yeah, so Kza Life, Kza is a Kinyarwanda word that means to strengthen, to move forward, to empower. We decided on this name because one time we looked back and saw what God has been doing through our lives, and we realized that, you know, the work that we did was involved around education, discipleship, and mentoring people. So we wanted to be more intentional going forward. And now, as we speak now, we have a team in Rwanda that are continuing to do the work that we do. We work with them from afar, but we have an early childhood education. That's one of our big ministry now. And then we have also a leadership institute that runs for a full year that is designed to train young leaders who love the Lord and want to make a change in Rwanda. So Kza Life is the name of the ministry, and it's continuing.
Awesome. Great. And then one final question, Jen. You are, or were the daughter of a dairy farmer from Elmira. God took you to places around the world, and all through his leading you, you've had to push through fears. And would you talk to us for a moment about peace? And then the second question is, what would you say to people that are struggling here today with different fears about, hey, you know, if I went to Rwanda, I couldn't speak this language, or I couldn't do that. So first, peace, and then kind of working through some fears. And again, God's not calling us all to go to Rwanda. It might be to be a life group leader. It might be to be on the greeting team, whatever, helping out people. You've got to peace and fears, if you could.
So I think, just short, so peace, I mean, ultimately is in Christ. And if that is, we can't find peace, we can't find rest when we're looking to other people for it, or to things in our life that if I have this, then this will bring me peace, right? It's about my relationship between me and the Lord. And so, you know, when I'm listening, when I'm asking God, when I'm listening for him, when he can bring that directly from him and his word, from other people, involving other people, that's another big piece of it, right? Because when God calls us out, there's always confirmation, you know, around us, and people just wisdom, you know, to speak into that, and that's a must. And because we need that foundation to go back to, yes, God's called me out to be a life group leader, or God's called me to move halfway around the world, or God's going to give me peace to walk across the street for our neighbor. Because in that, he's calling us just to be faithful to the next step. And it's not this big grandiose thing. You're not going from Elmira to Rwanda tomorrow. There's many, many steps between here and there, right? And so it's always about being faithful with what's in front of us. Are we being faithful to what God has in front of us, the people God has in front of us? Are we serving them? Are we seeing them? You know, as this whole series is, you know, being together on mission, you know, with God, like, how are we together with God in the mission that he has here in this world? And yeah, so if you're wrestling with that, I said in the first service, and I'll say it again, if you want to talk to somebody, I'm happy to talk to anybody about that. So you see my face, you know who I am.
And just as we close, I just was thinking when you were talking there, for our young people in particular, a lot of times, you may think, hey, God, you just got to do something, show me real quick. Yeah. But listening to your story, it's that day in and day out, just being close to the Lord, learning to grow in him, read your Bible, praying to him, and then just trusting him step by step, being faithful. Okay. Great. Hey, I've asked them if at the end of the service they would be at the front. If you'd like to say hi to them or talk to them about missions or vision or leadership, please, they'd love to meet you. Would you show your appreciation with me for them doing that? Thank you.